Today's episode comes to you in partnership with RotaCloud, the people management platform for shift-based teams. RotaCloud lets managers create and share rotas, record attendance, and manage annual leave, all from a single web-based app. It also makes work simple for your team, allowing them to check their rotas, request holiday, and even pick up extra shifts, straight from their phones. Try RotaCloud's time-saving tools today by heading to rotacloud.com/Phil. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Andy Jones, leadership coach and host of the awesome Hospitality Leadership Podcast. Coming up on today's show, Andy says boof
and boof.
Phil goes digging because I think there might be a story there. And Andy recounts what going through an opening can be like.
To be honest, frankly, I'm surprised we even got it open.
All that and so much more as Andy chats us through his wonderful journey so far. Andy is late to the hospitality party, but he's now doing high-impact work, and as you might expect as someone who's incredibly passionate about leadership, there's a lot of leadership takeaways from our chat. A huge thank you to Andy for coming on the show. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave us a review. Enjoy! And a massive Hospitality Meets welcome to Andy Jones.
Thank you very much, Phil. How are you?
I'm great, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good.
Good.
Very,
fellow podcaster.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm honoured to be on Hospitality Meet. I think when we first started our cafe, was it? Or not long after that, I think I stumbled across your podcast and, it was one of the first podcasts I ever started listening to. So that's...
Oh, bless you.
That's you've inspired me.
Well, thanks very much for coming on the show. We'll see you later. We'll leave it there. It's not going to get higher than that. No, that's great. That's really good to hear. But let's take a moment to reciprocate the back scratching. Your show's awesome. I mean, the one thing that I love about this medium is the conversations that we get to have, right? Mm-hmm. And you're doing something which is bloody needed, to be honest, which is central discussions around the subject that everybody needs, a bit of leadership.
Yeah. I think it's always been a fundamental part of my life from even back at high school. I was rugby captain, and it was a school that was very serious with its rugby, similarly to how, schools in the States are with American football. It was very serious. And I came into that team, very new. And even from that point, realized the impact that leadership has, just on interactions day to day, and coming forward into, the hospitality industry more latterly. It really hit me, the conversation I had with my staff about the awful stories they had around leadership. And that's really was the inspiration behind the podcast, really.
Yeah. Well, we'll absolutely get into that as we go through the fullness of discussion, but you've kind of nicely segued into your story, really, which is take us all the way back. I mean, because you're a late arrival in hospitality, but before that, there's obviously a career that led you here. So from school, what happened next?
Yeah, well, school, I went to university out of high school for sports coaching initially, and that was the sports background and wanting, even again at that age, wanting to serve people as a coach was a desire to have. And long story short, university, being away from the Isle of Man, as we discussed earlier on about being from an island, it's a big change going from an island into a city.
Yeah. So
I came home and then actually transitioned into building surveying, and I ended up doing a degree in building surveying, specializing in property maintenance and pathology of buildings. And that actually led me into my very first hospitality role. And I was working for a local hospitality business with an estate of 46 pubs, dealing with the maintenance of those. And that was the first insight of what hospitality was. Not so much around the operational side, although, we were involved in the operational side naturally, especially with refurbs and, kitchen maintenance and bits and pieces. But that was the first glimpse of what hospitality can bring people. And, you see the amazing experiences that people have whilst they're in the venues and interacting with amazing people. But yeah, beyond that, then I went further into down the construction route and eventually moved into government and worked with the valuation office there for a year before going into agriculture for 2 years, then into fisheries for another 2 years.
Oh,
Yeah, and then into the finance, into treasury, into central government after
is this
that,
all?
and
This is all on Island.
this is all on Ireland, yeah.
Yeah,
So I've been from born and bred here on the Isle of Man, and but yeah, the variety that I've had has really served me, I think. You know, as an island, and you'll appreciate this, there's a lot of people that know other people, and things operate differently on small islands, and the lessons I've learned from the experiences I've had from all the different sectors is has been eye-opening, and I'm very privileged to actually have had that at very young ages, you know, dealing with awful managers and how you approach them, and even in my very early 20s had that, and that stuck with me.
I love how you said I've been very fortunate to have terrible managers.
But,
Basically, I like
you
that's a
know,
really good way to look at it.
but people see now, and this conversations I have is people have issues that I was dealing with in when I was 20, 21, 22, when they're in their late 30s, 40s, and the impact it has on them, having had careers of relatively settled periods. I'm looking at it and going, "Yeah, I seen that." You know, you have that ability to see situations developing in different ways now than I did, and I'm glad that I can see that now, whereas some people don't always see what is ahead of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
It's that benefit of experience is massive at such a young age.
Yeah, I think that equally the law of averages tells you that at some point in your career, or you're going to be very very lucky actually if you don't have somebody that you
Yeah,
work for who you disagree with in some way. So
yeah,
a massive way that makes a difference to your emotive state and to all of these things. I mean, I've had multiple experiences of that, and I think your way of looking at it, I think, is a wonderful way to look at it in terms of the experience that gives you in
mhm,
your ability to, I suppose, stand up for yourself,
yeah,
and that basic life skill of, just if it goes against what you believe in, stand up for it
yeah,
and push back. And you can push back in a good way. It doesn't have to be, shouty and negative.
yeah, and I think it's really helps me now. It allows me to help people better now as a leadership coach, and, you know, a lot of the barriers I've, you know, found with potential clients sometimes is that, well, right now I'm 33, and people see that as a negative, but the counter is that the experiences I've had, and as well as, you know, my values of being principled, etc., I can that's what allows me to help people in ways that they may not expect from someone who is relatively so young and who has relatively had a relatively short career in hospitality. It helps me having that varied experience before then to be able to give people a direction or an insight that they may not have had ordinarily.
Yeah. I think equally your varied experience out of industry
Yeah,
is great for that kind of fresh set of eyes approach. Is that if you've just been born and bred through hospitality, and I'm not suggesting for a second that that's wrong, but it perhaps you might be a little bit blinkered into one, two, three ways of doing things, whereas there might be 20 ways to do things.
yeah.
And you're I would imagine you're able to bring that into both your coaching and your day to day.
Well, I think certainly the experiences, because a lot of my roles were very political, so you're working with politicians or very closely with politicians or senior civil servants. It gives you that perspective. You know, you're constantly viewing things from what are the optics on this? What's it going to look like? And again, when you start thinking hospitality, I remember even when we first took the cafe over, that was you I was looking at it from the optics of a customer. What's the external image of it? What do people see? How do they experience it? And I think that's where it came from, you know, having that experience in corporate environments, in political environments where you're really analyzing what's the impact of this, translated massively into, you know, setting the cafe up in the way that I wanted it, crafting that experience that I wanted for our customers to have. Without a doubt, that was bolstered by the fact I had that experience in the past.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about opening a business when you've not got specific hospitality experience at some point, because I think there might be a story there. But anyway, let's complete your story, as it were,
Mhm.
and take us through there. So, all of these different experiences in government. What happened next? Where did you go after that?
So there was a cafe in our family. So my auntie had a small cafe in a park. It was seasonal, so it was open April to September. And she fell ill and she was looking for potentially a buyer. And we spoke about rugby, but I had shoulder injuries and ended up going down the cycling route as well. So massively got into the coffee culture or cafe culture of cycling and always wanted a cafe. So when it came up, it was like, this is an opportunity.
It's a
It was
sign.
significantly cheaper than the market value of the business, which, you know, we couldn't shun that. There's a big opportunity there. But yeah, so that's essentially, and as we were speaking about earlier as well, is I fell into hospitality and the opportunity was there. I took it. And yeah, so we ran the cafe. I think it was January 2019, we decided we were going to go for it and ran it that first year through the as it was, built up some cash and then did a refurb uh,
I know
right
what you're going to
before the
say.
COVID pandemic. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And we were just that word that we want to try and erase from our vocabulary, but that's where we were. We literally opened, I think it was 6 weeks before lockdown. And just getting that momentum going, just getting that cash flow where
Yeah.
we wanted it to be, and poof,
Yeah.
door shut. And I don't think any time in my life I've had a period like I did through there, of that massive uncertainty of what was happening, when we were gonna be open. And I remember it now, it was almost, I haven't really thought back on it too much, but massive spiral in a way. This just don't know what to do, when to do it, how to do things. So yeah, so it was a very interesting experience. And then fast forward a little bit, we sold the cafe in August 21 with a view of looking at a more central location that was better footfall in in the middle of our town. And then obviously we had the issues with price increases, cost increases, which put it on the back burner. And
Mm.
that led me into then thinking, like, how can we start to share the knowledge with people who are very similar to me and, coming into the industry, no knowledge initially, we can't be the only ones. And that was the idea around how we could start having more conversations. That where the podcast essentially was born from.
Yeah. I love that. I love the kind of the fullness of all of that, but also that there, and we were talking about this earlier on as well, the almost the lack of plan. It was like an
Yeah.
opportunity presented itself, and it
Mhm.
was like, actually, I really fancy this. And I'm going to come at this from I suppose, a naive perspective. And I've spoken on this podcast before about the power of naivety. I think if you're naive to something, a lot is made of that as a negative trait, but actually, it's the greatest trait in the world when you're starting a
Mhm.
business, because otherwise you'd probably talk yourself out of doing something.
Well, I think it's not even in a business, it's in any career path, any role you go into. And I think it's actually been one of my strengths. I've had that diverse background of different sectors and dealing with different environments. But the one thing I am able to do is when I go into those businesses is to be able to actually see things that people hadn't, they've been, it's just the way it's always been. Actually, well, why are we doing it that way? It's not efficient. It's not great for us. Not great for the customer. So it's always been a strength of mine to do that. I think the curiosity that I have lends itself to that. Anyway, I'm a very curious person, which has always seen me well. But I think it does. You're right. Being naive, being that fresh set of eyes going into a new industry is so much more of a strength than it is a weakness. And
Mm,
and if you can approach it from that point of view, with that mindset, it can really help you adapt better and quicker to the role you go into.
absolutely. And I think then kind of back that up with what you like as a
Hmm.
consumer.
Yeah.
So, producing something that you would like to experience. it's a very good grounding to start from,
Mhm.
and of course you can then build out as you get more knowledge as you go through it.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, let's go back to day one of opening when you took this on. I believe not everything went quite according to plan.
Yeah. So, and I think, and I know, and I
This is
know
not going to bring up
now.
any demons, is it?
So for a bit of PTSD, but no,
Yeah,
and I shouldn't joke about that because I know how serious that can be for people. And but we opened the or agreed to take the cafe around the time it was January 2019, yeah, that we agreed to take the cafe. And at the same time, our family was going through a very difficult period, employment tribunal for someone in our family,
right.
and I was very much helping with that. And this is the link to the PTSD because, as it happens, uh, family members have suffered from that as a result of that. But
Right,
anyway,
right, right. Yeah.
so everything in the lead up to opening in the April was all up in the air. So initially thinking, got plenty of run in for this, plenty of planning time.
That's dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah, and not to mention that our daughter was born in the early February. So it was, yeah, there was a lot going on at the time. And to be honest, frankly, I'm surprised we even got it open for the April the 1st. But the biggest thing for me is looking back on it, and this is what I tell everyone, the fundamentals have got to be right. We're planning, making sure we've got, the seats are all in the right place, we've got the right stock, we've got the products that people are going to want, we can deliver our menu item. And we were we were literally 10 minutes from open, and I'm not exaggerating. 10 minutes from open, I opened the till, put the punch. I remember vividly punching the code into the till drawer pops open, and there's nothing in there, and
No
I'd
float.
forgotten to collect the float.
Aye, aye,
So,
aye.
you know, and a lot of listeners will resonate with this, the franticness of, you know, opening a business. First day of opening, that anticipation, that pressure, and to be able to then jump into the situation of near panic,
Yeah,
of scratching had to go to the business upstairs above us, who helped us out with a little bit. It still wasn't enough, but one of the things that really did show is how resourceful you have to be at times. Okay, we could have planned a lot better for this and gotten over that issue. We wouldn't have had that issue if I'd have made sure that the plan was right. But then the resourcefulness kicked in, and that's a very key part of, again, hospitality demands
yeah.
that as an employee trait. We have to be resourceful. We are constantly reacting, and that was my first taste of how do
Welcome
I have
to
to adapt to this on.
hospitality.
Yes.
Yeah,
But ultimately everything worked. Nothing, the usual tweaks that we would make. We didn't have the luxury of doing a soft open. We were straight into the season.
I was
But
going to
we
ask you,
did make
is it seasonal business in the
it
main?
was. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it's basically it's sat in a children's play park. There's a lake there, Boaton Lake, with electric boats now. They weren't electric when I was younger. I still remember the sound of the engines popping all the time when I was younger.
Right.
But that's the sort of area it is, crazy golf, etc. It gets absolutely rammed between, certainly summer holidays between
Mm.
April and the end of that. Sorry, school holidays between April and the end of term. But yeah, so it was, you were into it straight away, full gas. Like within 10 minutes of open, the cafe was full.
Yeah, you definitely want to have a float for that, then, don't you?
And we did. We needed it, and
Yeah, yeah,
we made it through. But where I was getting to with this is, from a customer perspective, they were none the wiser of what was going on in the background. And again,
yeah,
it's a skill set of hospitality, is that we, as much as things are controlled chaos,
yeah,
certainly in the kitchen they can be, but there's an element of that. But it's about how we can deliver as an industry this amazing experience without actually people seeing what the challenges we are facing in the background. And yeah, I think as far as my career is concerned, it's probably one of the most memorable days of everything I've ever done.
Yeah, well, lots of emotions going through your head probably on that day.
Yeah,
Excitement, dread, then the panic as you realize a reasonably important part of the day to day has been
yeah.
missed. My missus will be listening to this, if she actually does listen to this, and saying, "Oh my God, where was your checklist? Where was your tick?" She loves a list, but lists have their place
But
for sure.
do you wanna know the most ironic thing is that my roles I've done before were all, you were developing processes, you were putting things in place to stop
Right.
this sort of thing happening, and I think and this where maybe my naivety didn't sort of work in my favor is that, yeah, we were under pressure anyway, but we didn't take the time to put those things in place thinking that, everything we've done, we can do you deal with it mentally.
Hmm.
And it was never straight, as easy as that. If we'd have had a spreadsheet or a checklist, we wouldn't have missed it. And, advocate for it now, everyone, if you haven't got checklists in your business,
Yeah,
get
especially on
them.
day one. Yeah,
Especially on day one.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, another part of that story actually is day two within 30 minutes of opening. Set day two, 30 minutes of opening, our extractor fan went, the fuse blew. Well, it was
Oh
actually the
God.
actual fan itself blew. And again, we were into that scramble of how can we adapt? And we had to adapt very quickly there. A lot of the menu was cut out of there. We had to see how we could do things, how we could deliver the same items differently. And with a relatively young group of people working at the time, I just remember being blown away about how adaptable sort of the 18, 19-year-olds were in that business as well. It was just, you know,
That's
challenging
really brilliant
times,
to
but
hear, actually, because
yeah,
they get bad press, right?
absolutely. But again, comes back to a conversation we've had before, and that's the personality trumps experience,
Yeah,
generally. We can't always say that in every role it does work
of
like that,
course.
but
Yeah.
in that case, I was, glad that that's the approach we took because it helped in that situation. If we'd have
Mm.
had people that weren't so adaptable, weren't happy to adjust on the fly, we'd have yeah, things have been a lot more difficult.
Yeah, and that would have filtered out to your guests, right? And then maybe the guests are not having such a great
Yeah,
experience, and that gets then reflected in reviews that you get, and
yeah,
it's a ripple effect and all of that. And ultimately, again, another thing we've spoken about is the experience is the most important thing,
yeah.
as in
Well,
the actual experiencing of the experience,
yeah,
not getting experience, as it were.
no. And I know like I say, I'm relatively new to hospitality, compared to, a lot of people's experience. But one thing I'm noticing, the more people I work with is that operators, and in a way, I think I was lucky coming into it being naive then, is that, I knew what I wanted to focus on, and that was the guest experience. But I think a lot of operators can get stuck into this, the day to day mindset of making sure everything is happening. We've got enough stock ordered, we've got the right people in, the right roles for each day, that they actually lose sight of the guest experience as a whole. And I think the more we can shift our mindset to see things from that point of view, you might not be able to operate your menu precisely how it is, especially at the minute, where we are with the reduced number of staff that are available.
Mm.
If you can adapt and constantly tweak what you're doing to suit the guest experience, that has to be the top level requirement of your business.
Yeah.
Then you can't go far wrong. And when we talk about how can we create memorable experiences, and that's what our focus is when we're working with people, is crafting those memorable experiences so that they come back again. We can all go to a coffee shop or a restaurant and have a great meal. What is it about the interactions you have there, the food, the environment that makes you go, I want to go back? And we've all had places where we have that. And that's your goal, is trying to unpick in your own location, how can we create those experiences for other people?
Mm. I think then as well, you kind of translate that through into the team experience and indeed your own experience.
Yep.
If you're constantly fighting fires and forgetting to take the moment to enjoy what you're doing, to enjoy watching the fact that you've got a full property, with lots of noise going around, everybody just enjoying themselves and stuff like that. If you just get caught up in the day-to-day of everything and forget to take these moments on board with you, then it just becomes a transactional, soulless business. And you've really got to keep that fire, alight for as long as you can.
Absolutely. We've got to keep that personality, and this is where brand and brand messaging comes in, we've got to translate that personality that we have on paper into what the guest sees. And we do that through our people, and we can't, if people are unhappy or if we're not got the right people in there, we can never deliver on that. And that's essentially like my big focus is all on how can we create this culture of service and the mindset of hospitality. We talk often about the skill set in hospitality, but my philosophy is that hospitality is a mindset. I think customer service and the chefs and the skills that they have in the kitchen absolutely contribute to it. But when it comes to hospitality, fundamental hospitality, it's a mindset. And we have to, as leaders, try and shape our people, inspire them to want to deliver undeniable hospitality to people.
Sorry to interrupt, but a quick word to give special mention to our sponsor, RotaCloud, without whom this podcast wouldn't even be possible. With thousands of customers worldwide, RotaCloud is already saving businesses like yours hundreds of hours of staffing-related admin every year. It's been described by its users as everything from a lifesaver to an absolute no-brainer, with one customer even saying that they'd rather stick forks in their eyes than go back to doing their rotas the old-fashioned way. If you're ready to take the pain out of people management, I highly recommend heading over to rotacloud.com/Phil to sign up for your free 30-day trial and see how RotaCloud can benefit your business. Now let's get back to it. Absolutely. Was there a point on day 2 when your extractor went down where you thought, what have I done?
I don't think I had time to think that.
Right.
There was no illusions. I knew it was hard industry. Was it harder than I thought it was? After in the fullness of time, absolutely. Were those 2 days harder still? I think so.
Yeah.
But I think again, it's that you almost operated in the blinded lights. You really didn't have time to think. You were just reacting, and everyone's probably been in that situation. Again, like I couldn't believe the extractor fan because we tested it was on for weeks before.
Yeah.
So it just took typically that it happens, and if anything that will happen. Well, anything that could happen will happen. It's Murphy's Law. I think they say that. You've got to be prepared for it, and you've got to be in the mindset of everything is in a constant state of flux. Nothing is constant, and we have to accept that. Biggest thing I work with our leaders is being dynamic. We have to have this ability to adapt as leaders every day, or from minute to minute. Even we have to be prepared to. Someone can go on a lunch break and come back and be in a totally different place than they were before. And that's the skill of a leader. We these training programs that we can go on, and we've done the ILM stuff and bits and pieces on. I'm not knocking it any way, but what I always found that it struggled to do is give people that the understanding of how dynamic leadership really is, and how you expect the theories that you learn to be applied consistently to everyone. And it's never the case. We're never able to rest like that.
Yeah.
And it's, this conversation is going that way. It's all about consistency in that we have to accept that everything is dynamic.
Yeah. Well,
that's the only thing that's consistent, is that everything that we do is dynamic.
Yeah, indeed. So I've had a saying in my head for as long as I can remember. The only thing that stays the same is that everything changes.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've got 2 lessons that have been very, very prevalent here in terms of a new startup. Make sure you've got a checklist. make sure you focus on the overall experience. What other advice would you give to somebody who was contemplating starting up a business in the hospitality space, especially now, I suppose, whereby there are quite a lot of different challenges in the marketplace? Because I think a lot, and I've absolutely had this myself in the perhaps I'm having a moment, and the moment can maybe last a week, a month, 2 months, beyond, whatever, where I'm thinking to myself, do you know what? I need a change. And I think a lot of people's go to for change is to open a hospitality business, because they've always fancied opening a restaurant, or they've always fancied opening a cafe, or they've always fancied running a B&B. And for me, it was both my wife and I, once upon a time, discussed about cashing in everything that we had and going and open a B&B on a Greek island somewhere, proper Mamma Mia-esque. So for anybody listening who's in that space at the moment, who's thinking, do you know what, I really want to go out and do this on my own, what would be other things that you would say to them to really think deeply about?
Well, I know we've touched on it already, but really how difficult it is to make sure that we are at a standard where you're delivering an amazing experience. You're right. We see, people say, "Oh, when I retire, I'd love to have a tea room, or I would love to, have a little coffee shop." And the reality is, these little coffee shops, these little tea rooms, are so much hard work.
Mm.
They think because it's such a small scale that it's a case of boiling the kettle and serving a cup of tea, and it
Yeah.
really isn't. And the the fundamentals of it, regardless, even with a small location, is you have to have the right people around you to support what you're doing. And it's, I wish more people would focus on getting the right people in to do the work. And as I mentioned to you, my experience with my staff and the stories they told me about how they've been treated in hospitality, and not to tarnish the reputation of hospitality anyway, but the the stories were consistent of just being treated awfully, being made to do things that weren't necessarily on their job description, and put under these huge amounts of pressure that just, I think some of them were telling me when they were like 16, 17, just starting, and just put into situations where they shouldn't be. And we as an industry need to level up what we do from a leadership perspective. We have to care. And this is where I always start with people: is if you don't care about people, you're in the wrong industry.
Mm.
We're serving people and if you're in it for the money, you're probably not going to sustain it as long as you maybe think you will do. And that's purely from the point of view that if you haven't got the right people around you, you cannot do all the work to make it sustainable.
Yeah.
You won't get people to be invested in it like, not necessarily like the owner would be, but to an extent where they really feel part of it. And that really comes from, as I say, caring for people, but also how can you inspire and how can you motivate them? And the biggest thing is you starting from your values, creating a vision for people, both for your customers, what's the vision you have for the business of how it impacts their lives, but how do you allow your staff and communicate to your staff that vision to the point where they feel invested in it, empowered to deliver and to contribute to part of it? That's a really big step, which often most businesses, I was going to say smaller business and hospitality, you know, every business I've worked in they haven't taken advantage of the power of having a great set of values, a great vision, and a mission for what you're doing. And that's, the first thing I work with clients on when we go into their business about how can we establish your purpose and communicate it properly.
Yeah, God, there's a lot to take in there, but
Yeah.
a lot of it is actually fundamentals again, right? I mean, really, it's a word that you've used before, but I completely am on board with you with that, because the thing for me a lot of the times in business, in any form of business, is that things get overcomplicated. But actually, if you always just come back to your fundamentals, then that's the baseline for progress of
Yeah.
any kind, right? So no, I'm with you on that 100%. How did the coaching come about?
So For me, my leadership style has always been it's always embodied the principles of coaching. So one of the one of the lessons I learned very early on is if you as a leader give people too many answers, they become dependent on you as a leader. And then we lose that ability for them to think independently, to react to situation. And when you start, you start scaling that, you start to cause more issues. And I noticed that very early on it was actually retail. We didn't mention retail, but I went into retail whilst I was studying, straight into a leadership role again there. And it was about how much of an impact it made when people were able to think for themselves.
Mm,
So really the coaching came about from, fundamental leadership skills of how can we it's that what's the adage or the story? It's you can give a man a fish and feed him for a day, teach him how to fish and feed him for a life, and translates into leadership 100%. We need to have people below us who are able to think and operate independently without relying on their superior.
yeah.
And essentially, that's how I've led every team from that point of view. It's about asking more questions, trying to get them exploring their understanding. And even again, I mentioned my curiosity before, try and from my point of view, understanding their thinking. And really, when we when we sold the coffee shop and again those stories of leadership, it was like how can I best influence businesses to change how they treat their people. And that was the real motivator is to go down the coaching route, is to get involved with businesses, work with them one on one, and actually develop not only the owners or the chief executives. It's more about how can we scale those leadership skills across businesses. And that's, yeah, fundamentally it was about making that difference. That's where the coaching really, the idea of working with people came along.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you've been a kind of an indirect coach for the vast majority of your life, really, so
Well,
far. So you're just formalizing something really that you kind of have a hell of a lot of experience in.
yeah, and that's like I say, it's stuff that I've honed over. And there's times where you don't ask the right questions, or you ask too many questions that and there's a balance to it when it comes to leadership. But you're right, it's about now formalizing that and being able to help people from a distance, but already making huge levels of impact with businesses beyond what I thought was capable, which is it's fulfilling to be able to do that.
Yeah, no doubt, because you're having your impact as well, right, on the industry as a whole. It's not
Yeah,
just about your own little world,
yeah.
as it were, and what's in front of you right now, but it is about your ability to make an impact
Mhm.
to where it's needed.
I think you can't you can't get away from that point. If you're working as an employee in a business, you can only influence that business. And the same, the podcast allows you to get messages from people saying how much it's helped them with getting started or to develop their teams. Just the conversations we have, and again, to be able to influence such a it's a minute part of the industry, but relatively large is it's a good thing, and that's what motivates me to keep going, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, the podcast. You brought that up very nicely there. That was the next thing on my list to talk to you about. So, yeah, how did that come about?
So, yeah, like I said, when we sold the coffee shop, we were looking for a location in the center of town, a bit more footfall. With us being in a park through the winter months, because we turned it into a year-round business, you were having to work very hard, harder than you ordinarily would to, get people to come, creating that destination. So we'd sold that to move, and then we had a COVID spike that winter, the 21 into 22. So we sort of put it on the back burner, thought, well, let's see how this goes, how it develops before we pull the trigger on a new location. We've started to then look at, actually taking action, starting again. And then the war in Ukraine and the cost increases that happened. And again, it was a case of, well, let's ride this out, see where it goes. And that was the real. I think I'd had the idea for it maybe the year before, but that was the real catalyst for saying, right, let's actually do some groundwork with this and let's see if we can start sharing our knowledge, see if we can help people to, not make the mistakes that we make. I know multiple times on the podcast now I've mentioned about make sure you get your float ready because I've learned that lesson. And if it helps one person, you know, I'm glad that we can have that impact. And that was really, it was about serving the industry. How can we, you know, get people the knowledge, from people who have gone through the experiences and the mistakes that most people would make in the industry and just give people a heads up and say, actually, I need to be on the lookout for this or that and give them that perspective, share the knowledge that is already in this amazing industry.
Yeah. How many episodes are you at now?
We're at 200 and I think 217 as of today, I think,
My life.
which, well, when we started, and again, I jumped into this, it was full time. We were doing 3 interview episodes going out every week, which was, at the time it was manageable, but obviously as, the coaching element has come on board or come as an income stream, we've got to adjust that. And yeah, there was a lot going on early on. I was fully invested in it. But, you know, again, as we were speaking about, it's about, the amount of things that you learn from being a host change, my philosophy changed from every guest I interviewed. There was something
Yeah.
I was picking up from everything that was, and selfishly, it was learning for me. It was developing myself. But one thing I can say is, meeting albeit virtually, meeting so many amazing people who not only are doing great things for the industry, but are also trying to help me as well, get the message out, continue to get the message out about where we can improve the hospitality industry is it's a privilege, as you well know.
Yeah, I am 100% on board with that concept. I've just always, at the risk of sounding like a politician, we are absolutely stronger together.
Yeah.
And there's so much knowledge in this industry around in different parts, all over the, all the various subsectors that exist, and we can all learn from each other. And I think even you're a great case in point here as well, is that we can learn from outside of the industry as well.
Mhm.
It's not all of the answers to all of the things that we need answers for are not just within the realm of hospitality. We've got to continue to keep looking outwards.
Yeah, and that is something that I encourage people to do is to look at other industries, look at what they're doing, how they're interacting. But in the same way as well, hospitality is should be, taught to more businesses. If more businesses had the skills of hospitality, whether that's physical or digital hospitality, they could improve. And I think we can't silo ourselves in ways like, oh, I'm only going to learn from people in the hospitality industry because,
Yeah,
we get left behind. And I think more so our industry, there's as much as tech plays a big part, we're not so led by tech. So the more that we can learn about what options are out there from a technological standpoint, there's a lot of benefits to our industry. I think the challenge is how can we not take away from the human connection? I think we need to make sure that any tech that we use supplements the human to human connection that we facilitate in our businesses.
yeah,
And I think that's a balance and a challenge for our industry, especially in this age of AI and where we go, as it becomes more or closer to being sentient. I think will come up against that challenge. But I think we have to make sure that we never get away from the fact that again, the fundamentals of hospitality is connection, and
yeah.
we have to protect that.
Here, here. That's another. I think I battle cried on your podcast, and now you're battle crying on mine as well. So that's the circle is complete.
Yeah,
No, that's wicked. So you still have aspirations to get back into having another cafe business?
absolutely. And we've said that it's still there. We've got this concept, this idea, which is relatively unique, certainly locally anyway. So absolutely. I miss the that interaction with people every day. I miss leading a team of 20 people. It's not something that is as easy from this point of view as being a coach and working with you get to work with leadership teams as a whole, developing them, but it's not quite the same as leading people. But yeah, the my love for hospitality goes beyond just serving it. I want to be part of it and be part of it for a long time. So yeah, we're still the plan is still there. We're just hoping things will settle down a little bit before, we make what is it's going to be a significantly larger investment than we had from the other location. But the will is there. The will is there.
Great. Well, I look forward to keeping an eye on that then.
Mhm.
Did you ever think, looking back at that kid who was rugby captain, did you ever think that you'd be here doing this? Or did you have other plans at that time?
Yeah, never, never. I think I've never had long-term plans. It's never been something that is,
I'm glad
you
I'm
know,
not
you've
alone there then.
but we society seems to build into us that we have to have, where you're going to be in 5 year times. And don't get me wrong, we have to have this idea of progress, an idea of a goal. But
Yeah,
I never had anything beyond how can I better myself, and that really that steered where I went with my studies, where I went with my career. What was the opportunity for me to improve myself? And certainly hospitality was never even on the radar. And you know what? Even the times where I wanted a coffee shop, it wasn't a case of I want to be in the hospitality industry. I just loved the idea of having a coffee shop. And until I got into the industry and realized, everything about it and what it encompasses, and I think the general public don't fully understand what the hospitality industry is or what it means. But yeah, by no means was there any idea that or want even to be in the hospitality industry at a young age. What I did know is that I like to serve people, and whether that was helping them to get better in one way or to make things easier for them, it always seems to be a fundamental part of my personality, which again, when you look at it now in this lens, it probably lends itself quite well to the hospitality industry.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a hospitality mindset right there
Mm.
for sure. So, and that, you're a wonderful case in point again, that it really doesn't matter when you find the industry. Just, if there's something about it that really you connect with, then just come in and give it a go. And
Yeah.
literally the world is your oyster. Which leads me nicely onto my final question of the day, which is, what, for anybody listening who is intrigued by coming into the industry, what would be your three reasons? We've probably had a few through this, but how would you kind of summarize your three main reasons for as to why somebody should come into hospitality?
I think the beauty of hospitality is it serves so many potential backgrounds. And what I mean from that point of view is that if you are coming into it as a second job, it will serve you, endlessly. The flexibility that offers. If you want a long-term career in hospitality, absolutely that is there. And, we need to shout more about that, get into this, like, we need to get into the schools and talk more about those longer term opportunities. I think if you want to learn a skill set that will benefit you in every single role in every industry you could possibly go into, hospitality is the foundation of that. I think I mentioned it earlier that every business, the purpose is to create a great customer experience, whatever that looks like. And hospitality, the industry, gives you those skills. It gives you the customer service, gives you that ability to talk to people, it gives you that ability to adapt and adjust on the fly, which is they're, f- they're so important to every other business, every role that you go into.
Yeah, just life
I don't think
generally.
we don't shout about it enough, how much you can learn and how much you can then take if you do leave hospitality and go a different route.
Mm,
We don't necessarily want to be encouraging people to go elsewhere, but the reality is that people will.
yeah.
It fulfills that transient role for people. And but absolutely, if you want to improve yourself as a person, hospitality is for you. if that's your mindset, you have to have that need to want to serve people fundamentally.
Yeah, totally. I couldn't agree with you more. I think we don't shout about that enough. You
Mhm.
know, I think I've spoken about this on this show before around the fact that you know when they were talking about obviously Brexit with making it more difficult for the flow of workers to come and go,
Mhm.
and that we were going to have to go down a high skilled visa route. But how do you really quantify what high skill is? Because for
Mhm.
me, the greatest skill in the world is the ability to make somebody feel special,
Yeah.
and that to me is the highest possible skill that's available to a human. The other things are just transactional skills that you can go and read in a book, or you can go and learn from practical theory.
Yeah. I think the way I see it is that, and again, that is the fundamental build. I know probably said fundamental a lot of times on
So
this episode,
I'll
but
take them all out, and that'll be your
just the
buzzword.
quote.
Yeah,
Yeah. But really, we need to have the right people in terms of personality in this industry. I think the expertise, the skills that some people can bring with them, they grease the wheels. They grease the hospitality wheels. They make it easier to deliver that great experience, but they're not the most important element of it. We've, like you say, we've got to make sure people feel special, that they feel cared for, because we've got this insight or this input into the most important events of people's lives, whether
mm.
it's celebrating birthdays, funerals, weddings, which I know all too about at the minute.
Yeah.
1 week out,
1
but
week away.
you
Yeah,
know this is the impact that we have. We help people celebrate, and again comes back to these memorable experience. We want people to create memories with us, and that's what we've got to always keep in mind. That's the goal. If we can do that, then people will keep coming back and back again and again to your business.
yeah. And that strikes me as a wonderful way to round things up. Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great to get inside your mind a little bit
Yeah.
more for beyond, and actually have a physical conversation with you as opposed to just listening to your voice. If people want to get a hold of you, I mean, I know that you're kind of out there quite frequently, but what's the best method for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is probably the best place to connect with me. So it's just Andrew Jones on there. We've also Instagram, andy.leadership, which is probably more, it's more general around leadership, not specific to the hospitality industry. But yeah, link, and obviously the podcast is on every directory. YouTube, we're starting to try and get our interviews on there as well now. So if people are, again, that's just Andy Jones. But yeah, looking forward to connect to people. And if there is anyone out there that even just wants to chat, if they've got an issue with people, whether it's a distinct issue, I'm more than happy to chat through some things with people and try and see if we can help them.
Brilliant. Andy, thank you so much for sharing your story, and I wish you all the very best with the next chapters. Sounds
Yeah,
like
no,
there's going
thank
to
you,
be
Phil.
many.
Yeah, and yeah, no, a privilege to be on. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Take care. And there we have it. A massive thank you to Andy for coming on the show and sharing his story. Head over to thecafehustle.com to reach out to him directly to help move your leadership game forward. We'll be back as usual at 8 p.m. next Wednesday for another story from hospitality. So until then, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.